Welcome to Live Well, Dream Big. I'm Suzanne Monroe, founder of the International Association of Wellness Professionals, where I've been teaching people how to live a life of wellness, tap into their passion, and go for their dreams for over 15 years. I believe living well and dreaming big starts with ourselves. This podcast will show you how to create a healthy, holistic life, empower your mindset, follow your dreams, and make a big impact. Let's dive in right now. Hi there. Welcome back to Live Well, Dream Big. Thank you for joining me for another episode. In today's episode, we're talking about being a curious coach. And whether you're a coach now, or maybe you're considering becoming one, or maybe you're someone who just helps people in your life, I think we all do a little bit of coaching. I think today's episode is going to support you in learning how to not just be a good coach, but an amazing coach. It all starts with curiosity, and that's what we're talking about today. And I'm going to be sharing my 3 tips for becoming a curious coach and an effective coach. So if you enjoyed today's episode and you want to hear more, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss an episode. And of course, share the show with a friend. All right, thanks for tuning in. Let's get started. I'm excited today to be in conversation with you about something I think we all need a little bit more of: curiosity. Today, I want to talk about curiosity and also how being a curious coach can help you to be an effective coach and actually help people. So whether you're a coach in training here at the IAWP or a coach from another organization, maybe you're just a Live Well, Dream Big podcast listener and you're considering becoming a coach, or you're just enjoying helping people in your life in whatever roles you play at work or with family, I think you're going to like today's episode. Maybe you're that person people already come to for advice and help and support. And the question is, are you being curious enough? Because to be effective at helping others, it starts with being curious. So here at the IAWP, we talk a lot about a word that relates to curiosity called discovery. They kind of go hand in hand. And in fact, our coaches in training learned how to develop what we call a mindset of discovery. And that's how they use this to connect with their coaching clients and help their coaching clients discover what they want to work on and what's next for them. They conduct something called discovery style coaching sessions to help them do this. So what is discovery all about? Well, it comes back to one of our core philosophies: be the guide, not the guru. Now, you may have heard me mention this before: be the guide, not the guru, either here on the podcast in one of our episodes, or maybe somewhere else, because it's one of these little phrases we do tend to throw around a lot around here. And the question is, what does it really mean? Well, it means that while we think we have all of the answers in life, right? We usually tend to think we're right about something, or we know, right? We think we know what people should be doing. You know what? It's actually not our job to tell them what to do. It's our job instead to guide them to their own answers, to guide them what they think is best for themselves. And from that place, they can make more empowered decisions and actually get better, longer lasting results. So how can we guide them? Well, it all starts with being open, being curious, and being willing to discover really what's going on for another person. And part of this is letting go of kind of our own judgment, letting go of our own ego that wants to have all the answers, letting go of being right, and just taking a step back and being present and pausing and being curious. So when we're curious, what happens is we get to discover what's really going on and what's possible. When we're curious, we open up a space for others to be curious about themselves, to start asking those important questions. So if you want to help others, you have to be willing to be curious and learn how to discover. And this part of this is learning how to ask powerful questions. And you have to be willing to really listen for the answers as well. So it's all about being the guide, not the guru, where you get to empower people to find their truth. And today I'm going to talk about 3 tips to help you do just that: empowering others to find their truth, being curious, developing a mindset of discovery. So let's dive into that. The first tip I want to share is be curious more often, right? So we have to kind of practice being curious. It may not be something we're used to doing, right? We tend to just say what's on our mind, or maybe say whatever advice that we have, or just kind of speak off the top of our head. And that's totally fine. But I think as you learn to practice being curious, you're going to find yourself sitting back and really being in the present moment. And when I say remember, I mean really remember what it's like to be curious, because there was a time in your life where I'm pretty sure you were curious when you were a young child. And when you're a kid, you're curious about everything, right? Why is the sky blue? Why is water wet? My 10-year-old son is very curious about how things works, and he loves to ask questions. And, sometimes I actually don't have the answers. Actually, probably a lot of the time. But we're all born with a sense of curiosity about the world. And then what happens is sometimes we lose that curiosity. What's happening, I think, is that our ego is coming into play, and our ego likes to know things, to be right, to be seen, to be heard, right? And so that part of us wants to have all these answers, and then often blocks us from really being in our natural state of curiosity. The thing is, being curious allows us to be open in life to what's working and what's not. The more curious we get, the more we start to ask ourselves questions and discover, okay, this is working or this isn't working. But if we're not curious, we just assume things, right? We assume things are as good as they're going to get, or we assume we can't change our circumstances, or we assume we know something about other people, or we assume we know what's best for them. We assume we know everything about what's happening in the world today, right? When really, do we know for sure? We tend to take in a lot of information that just continuously supports our own viewpoints, right? But really, how do we know for sure? Being curious is truly the foundation of having a discovery mindset. And so it's so important first in our own lives so we can be open to learning more about ourselves and growing, but also in personal relationships. Because what if instead of assuming we were curious? What if instead of assuming things about other people, judging them, or just assuming we know what's right, we were curious? We'd open up a whole new level of potential, really. And I've personally seen the power of what happens when someone turns on their curiosity, puts on their discovery lenses, and I've watched thousands of coaches learn how to develop a discovery mindset. It's not something easy because, again, we're out of practice, but it's something that with practice we can do, and we have to be intentional about it. In fact, when I first got started as a coach, I needed to learn how to practice curiosity with my own clients. Instead of showing up and being curious, though, I would do a lot of things that would block me from being curious. First, I would over-prepare for my sessions. I wanted to appear perfect, to appear like I had all the answers to their questions. So I would assume ahead of time what it was I think they needed to work on. And I'd spend a lot of time planning that all out, right? And then I spent most of my time giving advice instead of really asking questions. Looking back, I think I was pretty afraid they would ask me something I just didn't know the answer to, right? So by taking control of how things would go, what resulted were clients who had a lot of to-do lists, but maybe little connection to what really mattered to them, or maybe a big piece was missing about what they were really supposed to work on next. And as a result, not everyone made shifts. Because what I found is when I wasn't curious, I wasn't able to get to the core of the issue. Instead, I would assume what I thought people should do next. And when we assume things like this, we really miss out on something greater, which I believe is that person's own inner wisdom, this wisdom that's always guiding them to what is really next for them. So I think the whole point of being curious is to spark that inner wisdom in ourselves and in other people. So that's the first tip, to be curious more often. And the second tip is to use this curiosity to ask powerful questions. All right, so one of the best ways to being curious is to get good at asking powerful questions. This is really at the heart of learning more, I think, about ourselves and about other people. Like if we don't ask questions, we can't dig deeper, right? We're kind of operating on the surface when we don't ask questions. I know for my own self, if I just pause during the day, maybe get out a journal and ask myself a couple of questions, things start to come to life. I start to get answers that were there, but I didn't realize. So if we don't ask questions, though, we don't have that opportunity. I was just listening to the Live Well, Dream Big episode with Michael DeOrio on betting on yourself. And I listen to some of the episodes when they go live, not all of them, because I would probably drive myself crazy re-listening to every episode. But I do like to listen in and try to put on my curiosity hat, be curious and see, what can I do better or what can I learn even as a listener? So I was listening to Michael's episode the other day, and I was reminded about being curious and asking powerful questions, not just of others, but asking ourselves powerful questions. Because in betting on yourself with Michael in this episode, he was talking about how he likes to journal a lot. And in fact, he did a lot of journaling and asking himself questions when he was trying to figure out what should he do next in life, right? He was really stuck. He was stuck in a career he didn't like. He was really kind of hitting rock bottom and he didn't know what was next. And he started asking himself questions. And by being curious and asking himself questions, he ignited something. So again, if we don't ask questions, I think we end up missing out on something. In fact, we assume things and then we assume that facts are simply based on our own experience, even if they're not true. There's actually a name for this tendency. It's backed by scientific research. It's called the illusory truth effect, or truth effect for short. And in various studies from, I think, like 1977 to present day, researchers found that people rely on whether or not information is in line with their own understanding or if it feels familiar to them. And that repeating statements or information led people to believe that the repeated statements were more truthful simply because they were being repeated. For example, hearing a fact that is wrong over and over again can affect a person's belief and then cause them to believe it's true, which I find pretty interesting. That's why political campaigns can be so influential, right? A candidate could repeat the same information over and over again, even if it's not true. People just start to believe it because it becomes so familiar to them. So our rational mind is saying, okay, well, I only believe facts, right? But our mind is made up of different layers, right? So our unconscious mind is really always playing a big role in how we perceive things. So back to the mindset of discovery, though, if we know that it's our human nature for us to believe things that are familiar to us and are based on our own experiences, then we can begin to see how that could affect how we perceive others in our personal relationships or coaching clients, right? Or with our coworkers, in any relationship. And we could easily think we know what's best for someone based on our own opinions and judgments. One of my faults personally is judging others. I find myself sometimes thinking, all right, I know something about someone based on kind of my initial perception of that person. Either how they dress, how they talk. I think, oh, I'm an expert in people and I put them in a box kind of in my own mind. Well, why is my mind doing this, right? Saying it out loud, I'm like, well, that's not a good thing to be doing. Well, a part of us, I think, wants to control things. So we think we know about a person, and then it kind of keeps us safe in a way. We know what to expect about that person, right? We have our ideas about that person. So we can say, okay, I know where this person lies. This is where this person stands. But you know what? It's actually not safe because then it doesn't allow me to be curious and ask questions and then get to know someone at a deeper level and discover who they truly are. So to stop ourselves from falling prey to this truth effect and thinking we know everything about everyone and instead shift into having really a mindset of discovery, we have to ask powerful questions. And when we do, two things happen. First, it allows us to hear firsthand what the person's experience really is, instead of, again, just assuming we know. And sometimes we discover, oh, it's completely different than we thought, or we glean some gem from what they're saying. And two, it does something even more powerful for the person we're in conversation with. It allows that person to process their experience and then speak what is true for them. And when that happens, I think amazing things can happen. It's really why conversations and two-way communication and dialogue is so important, especially when one person asks a question and another person answers. And when we do a lot of listening, it can be very healing for someone. So that is tip number 2, asking powerful questions. Now let's talk about the third tip. Listen carefully, right? So we want to be curious, we want to ask questions, but then we also want to sit back and listen. We have to combine curiosity with listening because if we don't listen carefully, we end up missing the whole point of being curious and asking powerful questions to begin with. And again, this takes a lot of practice. Have you ever noticed how when someone's talking, you can be only kind of half listening and then the other part of you is thinking about what you're going to say next? I know I find myself doing this a lot. I start getting downstream with my own thoughts and opinions about what I'm going to say next, right? I'm thinking ahead to what my response will be. Okay, this is not being in the present moment. I literally have to stop myself, take a breath, and remind myself to listen to really what the other person is saying and just come back to the present moment. Otherwise, you really miss out a lot. An example is this. I have this women's circle that I'm a part of, and we have a time where we all go around and we share what's happening for us since we last met. And, I found myself thinking about, okay, what is it I'm going to share when it's my turn, instead of really listening to what each person was saying. So I had to stop myself. And the beauty of doing that is that when it did come time to my turn, I didn't have anything planned. I didn't get downstream. So whatever I shared was just meant to come out at that time rather than some planned scripted share. And I think I surprised myself by sharing something that I didn't even know was on my mind, right? But then it allowed me to process whatever that was. But had I planned it out, it wouldn't have gone that way, and I would have really missed out on everybody else's shares. Maybe you've noticed this with yourself. You're thinking about what the person is saying. You're also thinking about what you're going to say in response. And maybe even listening to this podcast right now, you're like thinking about other things, thinking about what you're going to do next. We all do it. It's just really having the awareness to remind ourselves to come back to the right now. I think if we truly want to help others and to be of service and to be the best version of ourselves, we have to practice living in the present. We have to put the pause button on whatever else we're doing and just bring ourselves to the present moment and listen carefully to what's really going on around us. What are we really hearing, right? We got to put down that phone, turn off that TV, whatever it is that causes distractions, and then remind ourselves to breathe and be right where we are right now. And, it's not just hearing and listening. It's actually noticing and feeling also. And when we do that, we notice other people's emotions about what they're saying. So there's a whole lot to listening if we just start listening. It's not just what we hear. And again, you can start with yourself. You can be curious and listen to your own self. I mean, how often do we ignore what our body is saying to us or the messages we're receiving, right? Oh, maybe your back hurts a little bit today, or you feel a little bit off, but we just kind of keep pushing ahead instead of slowing down and stopping and saying, I wonder what this is about. If we ask that question, we might actually get an answer from ourselves. I think it can be hard, though, to change to being curious and asking powerful questions and listening carefully, right? Being curious, asking questions, listening carefully. These are kind of the 3 tips we've been talking about today that can help us to help others and really help ourselves. But it can be challenging to make those changes. And it's partially because these are skills that we started to build when we were young, but over time, we really lost them. The good news is these skills are natural to us, right? So when we slow down and we put our intention on being present, we're reminded of this natural part of ourselves that is already a part of ourselves. So I encourage you to try this out today. Be curious and see what happens. And maybe even after listening to this episode with the next person you encounter, maybe it's someone at work or a family friend or your kid or your neighbor, just notice what happens when you hit that pause button. You pause, force yourself kind of to go into the present and just be there. And maybe step into a mindset of discovery and be curious and ask that person a powerful question. See what happens. All right, those are my thoughts for this episode, and I want to thank you for joining me. I look forward to connecting with you again soon. Go out there and be curious. Thank you for joining me for today's episode of Live Well, Dream Big. I hope you enjoyed today's conversation, and I want to invite you to take your next step toward living well and dreaming big by downloading the Live Well, Dream Big lifestyle book. It's the ultimate guide to becoming your best self and living life on your own terms. You can grab your complimentary copy by going to the link in the show notes or heading directly to IAWPwellnesscoach.com/guide. That's IAWPwellnesscoach.com/guide.